Hello and welcome. Good morning. I'm Brenna Clanton, your worship leader for today here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. My pronouns are she, her. As we begin our service, I invite you to silence your phone, close other windows on your computer, and take a deep breath and center yourself for worship. That offer for anyone who's interested in offering me ringing lessons is still open. Practice, not perfect, right? We open in welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like Olive Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on in their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Petawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together shall one day know full justice. Thank you, Kate. I am so grateful to co-facilitate one of our Soul Matters groups with you, and I'm so wondering what the theme is this upcoming next time we meet and how many different ways we can apply it. So thank you for that announcement. And one other thing, so we are going to go into, I think we'll do our hymn first. Oh, is that okay? Chalice lighting? Oh, is that mixed up? Okay. Let's do the chalice lighting. Before I do the chalice lighting, and bear with me today. It is a joy to be here with you all, and we do not have religious education. So I noticed some have already taken advantage of our playground up at the front, and if anybody, whatever your age is, needs to move today, I raised 3 kids in this church, so I am saying this from the heart. Please get up, move around, leave the space for a while. It will not be long, and I have a sermon to give today. So, everyone is welcome, and glad you all are here and be here in the way you need to be. So, our chalice lighting today, as Sheila lights our chalice, this is from Beth Casebold. The light of this chalice reminds us that it is a symbol of all the world's religions. The small light shines, as do the fires burn to ward off the darkness and welcome back the sun. In the Celtic and Native American faiths, as do the Jewish Shabbat candles and the Christian altar candles, as do the oil lamps of the Hindu Diwali and the candles of Buddhism. And it is the symbol of the light inside each of us as recognized by Muslims. It is a symbol of the sun and evolution as studied by humanists. As we light this chalice, may we be reminded that this light is a symbol that ties us to many faiths, beliefs, traditions, and customs from which we can learn and enrich our lives.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Sheila Doles, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. My pronouns are she, her. This congregation is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world. If you're new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, our minister, Rev. William Levewood, or one of today's greeters. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour, online and in person, immediately after the service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
So today's Time for All Ages is again for all of us. It's Beyond Every Door, and this is by Molly House Gordon. I have a question for everyone in the audience. This is a book that I remember being read to, I think in second grade. So who here knows the book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? This is the best picture I could find, I'm sure. And by the way, part of this, my ministry is photography. I did not take these photos, and I would have loved to have found all these doors. I will share with you some of them. They are from a website that I'm using with permission called Unsplash. So can one of the kids in the room tell me how Lucy Pevensey discovers Narnia? It doesn't have to be a kid, and you can shout it out. The wardrobe, right. So wouldn't it be cool if there were a magical world behind every door? I love that Lucy finds the perfect place to hide. And when she opens up the door to the big wardrobe, she goes through the door and into the back of the wardrobe, and suddenly she's in a whole nother world. A magical world with witches and fauns and talking beavers. So when Lucy opened the door to Narnia, it didn't look like anything special. It was just a boring door, full of clothes and coats, and across that threshold was magic. Lucy already had a foot in Narnia before she quite realized what was happening. So many of the thresholds in our life are like this. We don't know what we're crossing into another world until we're already halfway there. So the door of a church, and this is a church, let's see if I can pronounce this. It is, do I have it? It's Reykjavik, Iceland. So I didn't get that captured in here, but this is a picture of a church in Iceland. So the Church of a Door takes us down a pathway of growth we might not have ever expected. Another door that we might open in our lifetimes is the door to a doctor's office. Sometimes that takes us out into a life with a hard diagnosis or a path that we may not have expected. Here's one of my favorite doors. It's a door to a restaurant. This opens out sometimes onto a first date, and it echoes forward into the relationship of a lifetime. I had this pegged as a picture from Italy. That's what it looks like to me. This is actually from Tokyo, Japan. See what I know. A beloved person's door closes behind you and sends you out into the world heartbroken. I had to get a dog in there. The door to a library, or a gym, or a dance studio introduces you to a life's passion you might not have otherwise discovered. And so I'm bringing this one. This photo was taken in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So bringing it back here to the United States. We cross these thresholds every day of our lives, for good and for ill, in joy and sorrow, in bittersweet truth. And truly, even our front door is a great threshold. No matter how familiar the worlds within and without may be, given our lives' reality of constant change, every day we open the same old door again, only to step out into a world that is new since the day before. And in this way, there is a new world behind every door, awaiting our discovery, if only we will encounter it as such.
From A Song to Echo by Jacqueline Beauregard. Before I came, I was in the bird song, announcing dawn in globes of dew, on needles of the spruce dropping onto fallow fields. I could hear gulls spread sound over the sea, colored blue by dawn light, and feel swelling water bounce off the ocean floor. There, in shafts of light, the bones of my ancestors began to drum an echo, and to that beat, stone pounded stone upon the shore. Out of the rock came life. Animals ground seeds. I inhaled life in the first breath that blew through a reed. My flesh moved, with other hands drawing rhythm from a skin drum, knowing hunger in the reach of an empty bowl. I wore my beads and danced on earth's soft face, gave life, helped children to their feet, learned from smooth stones to question my uneven edges. For a time, it is all mine, until my bones form instruments for the coming dancers, whose song, whose indecipherable words my spirit will come to understand.
So this morning I get to share some thoughts with you on the sources that we turn to for our spiritual grounding. When I first came to Unitarian Universalism, I was pleasantly surprised that I heard readings by Rumi and Mary Oliver, and that I, as a layperson, could offer a sermon on Paul Tillich and Thich Nhat Hanh on the same Sunday. And yet the things that we turn to in our search for meaning, justice, and truth, and that which is most holy, are far more expansive than I could have ever imagined. And so there's 6 categories in all. I'll have stories as I share those with you today. And I'll invite us into some time with stories that center on the different sources. So Unitarian Universalism is an experiential and embodied faith. Theological and UU minister Forrest Church wrote, "Unitarian Universalists are neither a chosen people, nor a people whose choices are made for them by theological choices, ancient or otherwise. Ours is a faith whose authority is grounded in contemporary experience, not ancient revelation. Though we find ourselves naturally drawn to the teachings of our adopted religious forebears, these teachings echo with new insights of our own." So I will share a few of my own insights. And one of the things that I was pulled to today is, just as there are many teachings we pull from in our faith, there's also many different ways of entering into this community. So you heard a couple earlier. We sang a song, "Many Windows, One Light." You heard me share a Time for All Ages about doors. So there's many different entry points into our physical building. So how many people came through the front door this morning? Yes. Did you think much about it as you were walking through that front door? So I have a practice sometimes, and it used to be before the pandemic when I was running late, I would use the side door. So I use it when I'm early, or if I'm sneaking through the back. May not be the only one here. How about the garden? Did anyone come through the garden this morning? Yes, I see somebody. So how many of us who might be younger in age like to go through the garden before church or after church? Maybe checking to see if there's any critters that you find. So when my kids were younger, we used to park down in the lower lot, and they would walk through the garden. I run through the garden before coming into the building. So when we enter a church community, we are searching for something. And so for each person here, it might be something different. It might be a spiritual home, a community of others to witness the mystery of the world together. We might have come here for looking for others who are practicing and acting in social justice. And perhaps we're hoping to find this and more. When we do come to this community, we are also able to give a little bit of ourselves. So the first source, and I'll be reading if anybody is looking for, I just recently moved my library to a different room, and so I know very intimately all the books, but if you're looking to add to your library, this is Sources of Our Faith, and it was compiled by Reverend Kathleen Rolenz. It's a gem, so I will be reading from this for some of these. But the first source is direct experience of all that transcending mystery and wonder. So years ago, when we first came to this church, and I can hear voices today in our sanctuary that remind me of that time, my children were young, and we wanted to offer something to the community. So maybe you can guess. I brought a prop today. This is some bulbs. Anyone want to take a guess on what I got to do with my children when we first came to the church? I have a bulb in my hand, so big hint. What do you all think we did? We went to the garden, yes. And so if you can imagine, my preschoolers, and the stewards of the garden at that time, coaching them and digging the holes and putting the bulbs in the perimeter. I think we took some bone meal and some compost and mixed it in, made sure that they were putting the roots down, not up. I asked my daughter, one of my daughters recently, she remembered that time. She was 2, and she'll be 18 in a couple of months, and she does. It was a fond memory. I was also sharing that story with someone, and they reminded me that it does sound much like The Giving Tree, one of our favorite books when I was a child. So another entry point into this building is through the windows. I have often found myself gazing at the stained glass windows of our sanctuary, framing the treetops outside. And I can see today it's not such a sunny day, but I've also enjoyed the clouds and the blue skies, and even today where it's somewhat clouded up. For me, it has been a view of what I consider to be the divine. Teresa of Avila writes, "The divine has no body on earth but you, no hands but yours, no feet but yours. Yours are the eyes through which the divine compassion is to look out to the world." So Teresa Avila is an example of our second source, which is the words and deeds of prophetic men and women, which challenge us to confront powers of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. So fun fact, Teresa of Avila, as a teenager, loved to read romance novels. That is not one of our 6 sources today. Although some might argue it is not. It is also said that she and her mother read these novels in secret since her father disapproved. She also was quite what I come to think of as the regular teenager of this day and age. She had interests, makeup, boys, attending parties, and this was actually what caused her father to send her to her first convent. When she was older, she had begun to embrace a more austere life. She wrote a book that I read early on in seminary, Interior Castles, and it uses this metaphor of a castle to represent one's spiritual life. So for her, the soul was a castle with God as the center, and prayer and meditation were the doors into the castle. So again, just that metaphor of doors coming in. Doors can take us to such meaningful places. Recently, I had the opportunity to attend a retreat, and it was on Buddha, Rumi, and Jesus. It was at a nearby Catholic retreat center, and there was a small group of UUs attending that retreat. It felt like we were living an experience representative of the third source, which is wisdom from the world's religions, which inspire us into our ethical and spiritual lives. So during that weekend, we had a lot of experiential practices. We chanted Buddhist chants one night at a fire pit. We knelt in prayer, as the Muslims do, one time during the regularly timed prayers. And we took communion. And it was amazing to me, the communion was actually blessed by someone, one of the attendees in Hebrew. For each of these great teachers that we talked about, we were asked, who is this person to you, and who is this person for you? And one of my favorite poems, it's one I've known, and many of you may also be familiar with it as well, but is one of my favorites from Rumi. It says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field, and I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. My experience on that retreat was to deconstruct what I was taught about Jesus, Rumi, and Buddha, and to be left to commune with each of them once that field was cleared. If I bring it back here to this field out here, I did come early this morning. And like others have said, I too was reminded of people that are like Allie, who were not here when normally she is here before I arrive. And so I was the sole person here, and as I was parking the car, 2 deer came out from the woods, 2 bucks, and made their way up to the memorial garden until I got too close, and then they quickly disappeared. So another story and another example of the third source, but I think this can also be the fourth source, so I'm going to use it for that, is the story of the Good Samaritan from Luke 10. I actually think I've talked about it in a previous service here, and for me it qualifies under the fourth source, which is Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. So I'm going to read the passage from this book, and then I just have a couple of thoughts. So the story goes, just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? And what do you read there? He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, a man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. He was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And so likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. And then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And he said, the one who showed him mercy. Jesus said to him, "Go and do likewise." There's a whole paper, there's papers on that, and I will not go into all of that detail, but what I wanted to ask, a couple things to think. I read that full story on purpose. I grew up, I only heard when the man was going down the road. I never heard the challenge from the lawyer at the very beginning. And for me, that's important context. One of the things that shows up for me in this story is the lawyer. He was an expert in law. He knew the answer to that question. And yet, he was doing what is termed a challenge riposte. He was trying to knock down the other person, to make Jesus look not so good and to lose the support of his audience. And so one of the things in the studies I've done around that story and others is this whole idea that honor at that time, and you can tell me if it's any different in our day, but honor was something that was a limited commodity. If I wanted to gain more honor, I had to put someone down in order to get that additional. It wasn't something that everybody could have equal parts of. The other thing I would invite you to think about with that story, which is so well known, this is a story that I grew up with, and I'm sure many of us grew up with, is where do I show up in that story? What part of that story do I relate to? The moral of that story, as I was taught, was that this is, always help those in need, always be a good neighbor. There is so much more to that story, so much more that we will not cover today, but mysteries in it. Remember once a director of mine, a spiritual director, said, well, where do you see yourself? Are you the dirt? Are you the donkey? Maybe you're the 2 denarii that are given to the innkeeper. Where is love for you in that story? So something to think about. For me now, I see this as such a rich story, and the parable is really, really used again in loving kindness meditation today. We expanded our circle. For me, that parable also expands our circle into who it is that we are able to show love to. The 5th source includes humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science. I love Reverend Lynn Ungar's reminder, and I'm going to read a piece from hers that is absolutely beautiful. The universe does not revolve around you. The stars and planets spinning through the ballroom of space dance with one another quite outside of your small life. You cannot hold gravity or seasons. Even air or water inevitably evade your grasp. Why not then let go? So as small as we may be in the face of the universe, I think what I also think about when I think of this source is how important it is that we all have views and beliefs that ground us. One of the most vivid and poignant visits I had as a chaplain intern was with a woman. I think she was there for just a surgery that, she had to have every so often. And I had a list in front of me, and the docket always says, if a person cares to share what religion. And so again, if they named that they were Catholic, we would have the priest go in. Depending on their view, their religion, it would determine which chaplain they got to see. And she didn't have anything, and I said, would you mind sharing? And she said, well, I'm humanist. No one has ever said that to me, outside of seminary. And we got to talking and I asked her more. And it came to pass that she shared that she did not think that it was important that she shared that she was Unitarian Universalist, that the chaplains were relegated to all those other religions, but not hers. Well, I went to visit her a couple of days later. I didn't tell her what to do, and as always, I said, I'd be happy to go down to admissions for you if you'd like me to request this change. I have a form. But she took care of it, and I stopped by a few days later, and it was almost like a sense of relief. My beliefs matter. And so may we all remember that whatever our beliefs may be, we are doing a great service by integrating all parts of ourselves as we show up to care and be cared for. So before I close with the last source, I do want to express my gratitude for this congregation, for today and all days, this community that means so much to me. In a couple of weekends, I get to join colleagues of mine who have already started this, but I get to head off to my ministerial internship at UU Congregation of Rockville. So this is my last Sunday here for some time. And yet, as I'm transversing new doorways and new windows, I will hold close this beloved community and all that it means to me. I remember once when Reverend Anya Sandler-Michael was here as a guest preacher. It was a preacher swap Sunday. And she observed that many of us, I think she called us a people who come from the woods. Does anyone else remember ever hearing this? I have said this to others here. What she meant was, this was before the pandemic, of course, we would park on the street, those of us who came later, and come in through the trees. So I did want to say this is yet one last way of entering into this space by way of nature and the sacred circle. Our sixth source is the spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions. So wherever you might find yourself right now in this moment, I invite you to look out at a window, possibly out at a canopy of trees if you are here in the sanctuary, or if you are joining us virtually this morning, anything that is nearby. In the words of Ann Peake, may we make space every day to remember what the ancients knew, what has been woven into the tissue of our hearts since the evolution of humankind, that the universe is a miraculous wonder to be celebrated, and that a miracle that happens every day is no less a miracle. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.
I invite you all now to join me in our community blessing with these words of David Bumbaugh. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
So as Sheila extinguishes our chalice, let us continue to move forward with the most love possible, that we continue to find doors and windows and other points of connection to the divine and with each other, knowing that there are many sources that will guide us in the most love possible. Blessed be. Amen.